Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and joining us for this NetOps Cisco Meraki WIFI support session. My name is Octavie Shakut and I'm your community manager. We are joined by Amit Moanti, who is one of the product manager of the NetOps team. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that if you are using the WebEx audio to listen to this webcast, you should use the chat box right in the WebEx to ask any questions you have along the way. Please help keeping your line on mute to prevent background noise. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to Emmett. Emmett, if you are ready, you can take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Octavie. And thank you everyone for joining this webcast. As Octavie said, along the way, if you have any questions, feel free to type it onto the chat window. So the way I have planned this session is I'll Wi-Fi support in NetOps 19.1, and we'll start with the architecture, go into the details of how we go about this solution, and then I'll end the webcast with a demo from the lab network that we have around here, and then if time permits, we'll take some questions. So with that, let me start this webcast. So let's begin by talking about our Meraki Wi-Fi support architecture. Now, the way, one of the key aspects of Meraki Wi-Fi is that the controller in this network, Wi-Fi network, actually sits on the cloud. And what we have is, access points which are actually connected to switches, and then through Vma link, they talk with the wireless controller over in the cloud. The way we have tapped this from a solution perspective is we are relying on our VNA, the virtual network assurance component, to actually talk with the Meraki controller. That's through APIs and syslog. That's how the VNA is able to extract the information out of the Meraki cloud controller. And then we also have SNMP information if available from the access points and the Meraki switches. But the overall structure being, so in this Meraki solution at this point, what we have is fault and performance. Now for fault, again, we rely on our spectrum, and for performance, we rely on the CAPM. The VNA pushes inventory, events, and performance data into the spectrum and CAPM, and then you could see the details on the CAPM or the NetOps portal. You can also go for a deep dive into the spectrum. Now let's get ahead with this one. This is sort of a view of what we have from a fault and performance perspective, right? We have the inventory. So these are screenshots out of the actual network, out of a network that we had discovered when we were going about developing this, right? So we have the network topology visualization, we have the fault monitoring, SNMP trap events, we have performance monitoring, and then of course we have the root cause and the fault isolation, which are the core values of spectrum. One thing to note that the network topology discovery is something that's inherent to spectrum. That's not something specific to Meraki as such. So if the Meraki network, the switches and the access points, you do a network discovery, you'd see the topology there. Now let's get into some details of what are the elements that we are supporting within this, right? So if we talk about entity and metrics, right? So we are supporting the policy group, the SSID, the Wi-Fi controller, the network, and the access points. Now, if we talk about the metrics or the performance items that we capturing from an access point perspective, right? These are bytes in, bytes out. number of clients. And if we talk from a controller perspective, we're looking at the total number of active access points, the total number of clients associated. So all these metrics are being captured via the syslog and the VNA, and those are being pumped into the CAPM, and from an inventory perspective, those are being pumped into the Spectrum. From an event perspective, we're getting that into the Spectrum. So again, if I talk of what do you see, and we'll actually see them in the demonstration. So if I talk of the cloud controller, on the Spectrum one click, you'll be able to see the general information, the serial number, the MAC IP address, the location and that sort of thing. And from an access point perspective, you'll also be able to see the general and the asset information details. And we'll see that in the when I log into the actual demo environment. Now, what's really important is what are the events that we are actually capturing, and these events you can see them on the CAPM or the NetOps portal, as well as on the Spectrum one-click view as well. Now, so some of these events do not have an alarm associated, and some events we have alarms. So for example, in this case, the wireless packet flood detected and wireless packet flood end, rogue SSID detection. So those we have alarms being created for those events. And then other than that, we have a very detailed event log, as I mentioned, right? So the association, disassociation, the WPA authentication, deauthentication. So all those event logs you can capture in the Spectrum one click, as well as those will be reflected on the NetOps portal or the CAPM. Now, so these are some views out of the NetOps portal. So in this case, what you see on the left-hand side is the alarm console, and and corresponding to that particular alarm, we can go to an in-context page to see the latency trend, the reachability trend, and of course we have the Meraki reports associated with the metrics that I told you, right? In terms of number of access points, in terms of number of clients, in terms of the bytes in and the bytes out, right? Again, we started with the SNMP support for Cisco Meraki solution in Spectrum 10.3.1, but in 10.3.2 and the NetOps 19.1, which includes the CAPM 3.7, we have a better solution in terms of having the ability to showcase, both fault and performance data. Again, these are screenshots out of the actual CAPM views for the Meraki charts, and this is the bytes in, bytes out. So with that, let me jump into my actual system here, where we'll see more details. Sorry, yeah. So what you see here, right, in this particular case, we're talking about the Meraki dashboards, and depending on the metrics that you saw that's being collected, these dashboards are self-service dashboards that can be created, to see the, for a wireless controller, to see the number of access points or to see the number of clients, and then you could have details in terms of a pie chart. So these are the Meraki access points, and you could see the clients again. You could have the bytes in, bytes out in terms of projection, as well as the actual bytes in, bytes out details from the Meraki performance chart. Now let me get into a alarm view, and from there probably I'll take you to a situation where we'll get into some details, right? Okay. So let me change the filter, because it seems the Meraki alarms. Okay, it's refreshing. But what I wanted to show you is that from selecting the Meraki alarms, we can actually go into the in context page to see the details. For that, let me try another route. I'll go into the devices, right? And these are actually the Meraki access points, and and from there I can go into the in context page to see the latency trend and the reachability trends. Now, this will also give me the details of it. I mean, in this case, there are no alarms, so it's not giving me. But the point being, we have the ability to look at the latency trends. We have the ability to see the reachability trend for an access point. And this is something that's native to the CA Performance Center or the NetOps portal. And the other key aspect that I wanted to showcase is, the spectrum aspect of it. So let me go into the spectrum. So this is the one-click view from spectrum, and we have the Meraki network discovered under the SDN manager, where you could see here. So the Meraki shows up in two aspects. One is the organization, and one is the technology. The technology is where you can see the controller, the cloud controller, and as I uh, spoke, right, within the cloud controller, we have details such as the number of, details for the access points. So in this case, you see, I have two access points in my lab network, and I can see those details. And I also have the general information, right, uh, for that particular controller. Now, if I go into the organization, that's where I actually see the wireless network and the access points. So let me drill down there, and then I'll open up an access point. So in this case, this particular access point, and we have a pre-created alarm that's there, and this is alarm from March 26th, right? And the point being, so you could see the alarms here, and also at the same time, I was talking about the event support. Now we can also see the details of the events that's been there for this particular access point. I'll have to change the time filter for that. So let me change that. Yeah. So here you'd end up seeing the events that we talked about, and these are all the events that we mentioned. And in case a particular event has an alarm associated with that, we'll also see those details. Now, the basic point being, this is our first iteration for Meraki Wi-Fi support, and we are continuing to invest further in this. And we got also starting to expand this into Meraki SD-WAN support. Now, from your perspective, I'd like to garner some feedback, particularly around the way you have Meraki currently in your networks, and what additional items would be of real help to you in terms of being able to take advantage of the spectrum aspect, as well as take advantage of the CAPM aspect, you know, on the Meraki support. The key differentiator that we are offering here is, a single pane of glass. You have the ability to look at your, be it Meraki network or be it any other network on a single interface or a single page, and then you can drill down depending on your requirement, if it's a fault, or look at the performance, based on the CAPM views. At this point, I'll stop, and if there are questions on chat, maybe I can take those questions. Uh, Let me see if there are any questions on chat.
Thank you, Amit. Currently, there is no question in the chat.
Okay, so let's do one thing. One other aspect that I wanted to go through during this demo is a quick look at the VNA configuration, right? because one of the things that I've been as I've been speaking with several of our clients and customers is the need to look at the VMA configuration. So let's quickly do that since we have some time here. So let me go back into the CA Performance Center, and then we'll go and open the VNA. Okay, so we're looking at
Amit, probably the last
yeah,
item.
yes, yeah, Subhadeep. Yeah. So I was trying. Let me open up the VNA so that we can show the VNA configuration details to the folks here. Let me get that. Right. So, corresponding to the solution that I was showing, VNA is one of the integral parts of this solution because as you saw in the architecture, it's through the VNA that we're getting the inventory and the performance information, and we are pushing it to the CAPM as well as the spectrum. Now, if we want to see the details of uh, let me see. So in this particular case, what I did is I'm looking at the engines or the VNA engines running in this particular setup, and what I'm concerned about is this particular plugin, which is the Meraki plugin. Now, it's pretty easy to configure the VNA for the Meraki plugin because we have the the details there. And let me, in fact, show you the on the documentation. Yeah. So
Amit,
this is yeah.
your audio is getting bad. I don't know if you changed something on your settings.
Uh, there seems to be some background noise, but I haven't changed anything really. Uh, but
Okay.
so maybe if anyone else is not speaking, maybe they can go on mute, right? Is it better or
Yeah, go ahead, please.
okay? Yeah. So maybe something to do with the connectivity, I guess. So this is the example of the actual plugin that we used for the Meraki setup. So what you can see here is the details of how to do that because that has been key questions as I've been talking with some of the clients here. And if you refer to our documentation, we provide this in great detail as to how to go about this, right? This is a JSON example of the Cisco Meraki plugin, and then we go into detail of what each of this item is, right? And how do you define that? And so I'd encourage, I mean, those folks who are taking advantage of this Cisco Meraki solution and using the VNA and the Spectrum as well as CAPM to refer to this documentation because we provide some rich details, particularly around what's there in terms of the configuration. I think I see a question. Let me get to that.
Yeah, we have
Uh,
two questions in the chat.
okay. So, what is the licensing model for VNA? Uh, so, by licensing model, do you mean like how do we charge for it? So VNA comes as a overall from with it's part of the overall the NetOps license. And for details around if you have a situation where you're starting to think about VNA, I'd advise you to get in touch with the account manager and go through the next steps. But as such, we're not, VNA is a part of our overall NetOps solution. And I think for the other question, Subhadeep has already answered it. So thank you for that, Subhadeep. Yeah, all the configuration for the VNA are actually done via REST call. Okay. Yeah. So this was the other configuration that I wanted to show to the folks here, right? And through the REST, as you can see, we can get the the plugins. We can put a particular plugin, or all those details can be done through REST calls. So Octavi, I think we are actually at a point where we can perhaps start wrapping up this call, unless there are other questions. And I would encourage folks to if there are questions, they can still continue to ask me on the community or reach out to me for the details. What we will also be doing is perhaps we'll be organizing another session where we're going to talk about the other aspects of VNA in terms of AWS support, how we are doing that, in terms of ACI support, how we are doing that. So we're going to have further sessions as well, where we're going to talk about what other aspects that VNA has been helping us from our overall modern network perspective.
Okay, thank you, Amit. I can't see any questions. So we are gonna wrap things up. And again, as Amit said, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with Amit either on the community or via email. Thank you, Amit, for this great presentation, and thank you to all our attendees today.
Yeah, and thanks Subhadeep as well for jumping in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Subhadeep. I'm giving you 8 minutes back from your time.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, folks. Have a good one.